Ladies and gentlemen, we are live.
Welcome to the MMA Opinion Podcast. My name is Liam O'Griffin, joined as always by Mr. Paul O.D.
How are things? And on this week's show, we will be talking about James Vick's retirement, UFC announces further cuts, Diego Sanchez's final dance partner, upcoming Bellator announcement.
And we'll also be looking at a post-mortem of UFC Vegas 18. So we've got lots to be getting on with. Let's be getting on.
I want to fight with Chuck. Chuck.
I think he just blew his wad there.
Anderson Silva, you absolutely suck. Are you still drunk right now? Are you still drunk?
All right, we do a quick fade out. I think our kind of intro music is getting...
Yeah, tiresome.
Yeah, there we go. Anyway.
Poor Frank Mir didn't get involved
No,
this time.
and I cut out before Frank Mir got in this time. Yeah. That's good. So, hell of a fight last night, but let's start off with some news.
Yeah.
What was the first item on your list there?
So you have James Vick announced his retirement. So James had a tough loss on ex-MMA. This is going back to last weekend. And looked very, very poor in the fight and just bad beatdown. He came out after the fight, and I'll just read out the statement he made after the fight. Yeah. He said, one of my main reasons for still fighting was to prove to my son that you can't just give up when things in life get hard. But this is not the way to teach him that. This is not like failing a test or losing a basketball or football game. This is combat sports, and this shit can be permanent. It bothers me that my 3-year-old son has to see his daddy with his jaw wired shut for 4 to 6 weeks because of all this. He is so little and doesn't understand. Time to move on and focus more on the family and raising my son to be a great man. Thank you to everyone, and thank you this sport for the memories. It's quite jarring to read that, being that like we've talked on the podcast several times in the last few weeks about different fighters and where they're at in their career. To see it from a fighter who's going home to his 3-year-old son, with bad injuries, he suffered a broken orbital, broken jaw, broken nose, and to see the impact that it's having on him and with his son, it's good to see a fighter having the wherewithal to walk away relatively young into his career. But it's a tough one also to see a fighter come out and be so open about his relationship with fighting at this point in his career. And
it's sad. It's a sad kind of a state to, well, not a state, but it's a sad point of a fighter's career, the end of the career. Like there's just nothing, there's nothing glorious about the end of a fighter's career.
Yeah.
You're flying high for the prime of your career and the early kind of victories and your rise to the top. But towards the end, it's just all bad news. And, I mean, he's undoubtedly taken some damage in his last number of losses. Yeah. Hopefully not permanent damage, as he's kind of alluded to in his own statement. But it's just sad. It's just sad. There's no good news when it comes to that.
Yeah, and it's funny, like you go back to when before the Gaethje fight, I suppose, and there was a lot of hype around James Vick, and that feels like it was only a few months back. Yeah. For a fighter to go from that point in his career to where he's at right now and retiring off the back of a few very bad losses, it can happen so quick. It make you wonder about the guys, and we'll touch on a few more of the incidences like this later on. You have Diego Sanchez, who we're going to talk about, and perhaps Alistair Overeem as well we'll talk about, and maybe fighters that have gone on a little bit too long. So
absolutely.
This is the juxtaposition of the fighters that do lace up the gloves for too long, and he's getting out, I suppose. No, he has suffered injuries, but like a lot of these are kind of cosmetic injuries. They're broken bones and they're bad injuries, but they're not lifelong damage.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that kind of leads us on to our second news item, which hopefully is a story of somebody who has pulled the plug at the correct time, and this is Mr. Diego Sanchez, who, for all intents and purposes, is about to have his testimonial match against Donald Cerrone. And definitely Diego is definitely in that phase where, you know, 1 or 2 fights in either direction and it could change his life for a very, very long time. We've talked that he's probably not he's definitely not going to run for a title at this stage. it's time to call it a day. And luckily, he has made an announcement to that effect.
Yeah, and as far as testimonials go, this is going to be a good one. I mean,
Absolutely.
to get in there with another legend of the game, a guy who, like, I don't know how this fight has never happened before, to be perfectly honest. Both guys have been around the welterweight and lightweight divisions for so long. They've kind of crossed over each other a few times. But yeah, phenomenal fight. And like you say, hopefully he's true to his word and this is the last one, and that he goes out and puts on another one of his epic performances. A Diego Sanchez fight is never boring. For whatever reason, he won their or what the fuck moment of the year last year for one of his
entire fight.
Yeah, for one of his stranger fights with who was that against again?
Michel Pereira.
Jesus.
And he
Christ.
peacocked him. He was spitting and
blowing bubbles and every fucking thing.
And then he ran at him at one stage, hands down.
Yeah. Just
sprinted
charged
into him.
Yeah,
Crazy.
he's a strange man. And some of his chat, you'd wonder about CTE, but I think he's always been a bit like that. He's just been a strange fish from day dot. So
yeah.
But
absolutely.
yeah, it's definitely a good fight for him to go down. It's a big name. I'd like to see the UFC make this a main event of some card. It'll possibly be on some. I'm not sure if they've picked a date yet. It'll possibly be on some pay-per-view card because it is a huge fight. But I would like to see them get that kind of treatment, that final treatment.
They deserve it.
Yeah.
Two legends, and and hopefully Cerrone retires at the end of this one also.
Yeah, like there's a lot of people think there's a lot left in Cerrone, but every time he seems to kind of win a couple, he has a few bad losses off the back of it. And it's like you've said many a time, if you're not fighting for a title, what are you fighting for?
Yep.
And I think that we're just seeing he's come to the stage of his career where I don't think he's fighting for a title anymore.
No, definitely not.
It might be one that they hang up he hangs up the gloves as well on, but knowing Cowboy, I'd say not. I'd say we'll see Cowboy for another 5 or 6 years in MMA. And ironically enough, this fight, while it's both guys, both legends, and there's a lot of respect there and former training partners for a very long time, there is that element of beef there because they're former Jackson Wink and Diego Sanchez was very vocal when Cowboy left, and then Diego Sanchez left shortly after. So there's a bit of beef there. So
there's a storyline.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one.
So anybody that's watching in live, we'd be interested to hear what's your opinion. Do you think it's time for Cerrone to hang up the gloves also? Do you think that it's enough for Diego to hang up the gloves and let Donald Cerrone back in there for another few? What's your opinion? Let us know. We'll bring you on. We'll bring your comments on screen. In fact, there's one after popping in straight away as I look at it. So,
you have Kevin O'Sullivan. What do you all think of the possibility that Cowboy might call it a day in the near future? You just beat me to it. I love that, the fact that Kevin was typing this message, heard us, and just went, no, I'll keep
continue
going.
typing. He didn't use the backspace at all.
Yeah, committing to the comment. Love it.
Also, brilliant.
So I suppose next news item is the UFC announcing further cuts. Now, the UFC did announce towards the end of last year that there was going to be 60 cuts by the end of last year, which never actually materialized. They cut a few. They cut about 12 fighters towards the end of the year. But it seems to be every card since they've cut a number of names. And some of the names they've cut, obviously coming off losses, but there's a couple of names that I wouldn't expect to be on this list. You have Sarah Moras, Antonio Carlos Jr., you have Reese McKee, who we knew was cut already, Marcus Perez, Spike Carlisle, Jacob Kilburn, just to name a few from that list. But they're guys that there was a lot of potential, and I know a couple of them have lost 2 in a row. But especially like the people like Marcus Perez and Spike Carlisle, generally fighters that kind of put on a show and they give a little bit more, and it's more of a performance. They tend to get a bit more time. So it's obviously a telling of the times that these types of fighters are being cut, and now is not the time to go 2 losses, or even certainly not 3 losses in a row in the UFC.
Yeah, no, and Jacob Kilburn was one of your interview guests as well, and obviously Reese McKee being an Irishman as well. It's sad to see Reese being cut, but
definitely,
like two on a trot, and it was just bad timing, I think, for Reese.
But the thing, so I'd be more positive for Jacob Kilburn and Reese McKee. I've spoken to both of them quite recently, and they're two young guys, and they have the opportunity to go away, get a few wins under the belt, and come back in maybe through a Dana White's Contender Series or something along those lines. Yep. I certainly wouldn't be too concerned about either of those. It's the likes of Sarah Moras, Antonio Carlos Jr., Marcus Perez is pushing on in years a little bit. Those guys are going to find it much tougher to get back to the big dance, maybe Bellator or something, or one. There are options for them to kind of stay at that level in their career.
Yep.
But for
PFL are kind of snapping up a few again.
Yes,
recently,
PFL is certainly an option now, and they're starting again in April. Their featherweight division and lightweight division look very strong. So, yeah, there's options out there for them. But for the likes of Jacob Kilburn and Reese McKee, certainly a few more fights, and there's certainly time's on their side. Yeah.
So, you mentioned Bellator.
Yeah.
So Tuesday coming.
This
apparently,
Tuesday.
Well, not apparently, but there is going to be a big presser for Bellator, and they're going to make some sort of big announcement. They've been slightly cryptic on what they're going to announce. Speculation is the light heavyweight tournament, or possibly another tournament, or maybe another signing or of some description. Yeah. Or what are we going to do? But there's definitely a fight for Cyborg in the works, and maybe they're going to announce that as well. Yeah. So what's your call? What do you reckon they're going to announce?
So obviously we can only speculate on this because they're holding their cards very close to their chest. I think first and foremost the announcement is their upcoming schedule, because we spoke about this all through January, that it was very strange when December 31st hit that they hadn't announced their first quarter of fights. Now obviously they're putting motion in place to have a run of fights in March or April, I believe. So it was just putting things together, and in times we're in at the moment, it's going to be harder to put on fights. Now, my wonderment of the last few weeks has been they have the casino, they have and they have the ability to put on fights. So is it a financial issue? Is it whatever, that's stopping them from going down that route? But that can't be the only announcement that they're coming out with. I'd imagine there is something big like a tournament. And I was kind of speaking to you beforehand that I think it might be a bantamweight tournament. They asked about, they put the question to the fans about who should Anthony Rumble Johnson fight first in Bellator, and I don't think they would have done that if it was going to be a light heavyweight tournament right off the bat.
Yeah, but I was saying that to you at the start as well, that if it was the case that they were picking the fighters out of a hat to put them into the draw, then that post was certainly ruled out a tournament for the light heavyweight. But when they did the heavyweight tournament, they actually pre-matched the first round of fights, so they could very, very easily still call for a matchup on that, and then still have that as just the first fight in the tournament.
So why I think no is because they might match up. If they're going to do an 8-man tournament, they'll match them in such a way that the semi-finals and final are as strong as they can possibly be. They're not going to put two of their top seeds in there together in the quarterfinals. They don't want, let's say the fans ask for Rumble to fight Yoel in the first fight. They don't want one of those guys to be knocked out in the first round of a tournament. Interest kind of drops off a tiny little bit if a Yoel or a Rumble gets knocked out. Granted, they get a huge fight, maybe kick off the year on a big note, but I would imagine that they'd aim for a semi-final or a final for those.
Well, my counter-argument to that is that all 8 of the potential light heavyweights that are in there, they're all superstars. Any pairing of any one of the 8 against any other one of the 8 is potentially getting rid of an end winner.
Yeah,
who have you got? You've got Corey Anderson. You've got Ryan Bader,
Nemkov,
the current champ, Machida,
Rumble,
Yoel,
Phil Davis.
I mean, they're all absolute killers. There's not one pairing of those that's not going to result in an upset somewhere along the tournament. I
still believe, though, that there is 4 of those that are of a higher stature. Okay. Again, and I'm only talking, I'm not talking skill set in any way, shape, or form. I'm talking who's star bringing power, eyes, bringing eyes to this tournament.
Pay-per-view sales.
and they're not going to match them up in the quarterfinals.
Okay.
I don't believe. Maybe, like I said, that there is an argument that maybe they want to kick the year off on a huge note and get a big fight off to headline a card other than a title fight. But I would imagine that they'd probably aim for those guys. Like, I can imagine a situation where Yoel and Rumble are on opposite sides of the bracket because they're the two big names at the moment in the light heavyweight division. But I could be wrong. I just see the only other division for me that is absolute fire at the moment and is screaming out for either a top contender and a title matchup or a tournament is the bantamweight division. You could make a 16-man tournament in that bantamweight division at the moment, like they did in the featherweight. So I can see it going that way, personally.
Cyborg is also very active at the moment. I actually had a back and forth with Cyborg before I realised it was actually her that was talking to me.
How did you manage that?
Well, she put up a post. Her actual Twitter handle is a kind of like a weird type of thing with her sponsors are in the Twitter handle. So it's not like Chris Cyborg.
Yeah.
At Chris Cyborg. It's like, I don't know what it is. Anyway.
I thought it was like C. Justino or something, no?
Yeah, but she has her sponsors in there as well. For some reason. It's like some sort of a betting company or something like that. So I didn't know who I was answering back to, but the official Bellator Europe, I think, or Bellator International Twitter feed asked the question who should be next for Cyborg, and they had the three options, two of which she's already beaten, and then Sinead Kavanagh. And of course, because Sinead Kavanagh is a teammate of ours, I tweeted, Sinead Kavanagh's got to be next. Yeah. And got a reply from, who I later found out to be Chris Cyborg, and she said she commented on Sinead's win record over the last 5 with a question mark. So I was like, kind of again tweeting back, not knowing who I was talking to, is saying, look, this is like, Sinead is predominantly a boxer. She's definitely going to stand and bang. It's a great stylistic matchup. It's a good scrap. You know, there's no back down in this girl. And then she said, "How's her wrestling and her takedown defense?" And I was like, and then it kind of, when I was getting a couple of replies, I then went and kind of looked properly, and I said, "Fuck, this actually has a blue tick on it.
Yeah.
This is a confirmed account." So as it turned out, I was talking to Chris Cyborg, and then so I was like, look, fair enough, she's primarily a boxer. She's not going to want to tangle on the ground with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Her takedown defense is fine. Nothing wrong at all wrong with her takedown defense. We saw that in her last fight. This is a great stylistic matchup, and regardless of who you both fight, I'll be tuned in anyway. And I got a thumbs up for that, and I was happy. I avoided a bait in there, I think.
So basically what happened is you were stoking the fires, you realised it was Cyborg, and
I bitched out then. But it was good. I've
got your back, Sinead, until Cyborg starts calling me out. I'm fucking gone then.
Well, I still stood my ground with the call out, though. I still think that so she was talking about Sinead's win-loss record over the last couple, and one of I think, is it Leslie Smith is one of the other girls that they're looking at matching her with, and Sinead has a loss to Leslie, but I didn't agree with that decision at
it
the
was
time.
very tough decision.
I think Sinead was robbed in that fight, and Cyborg has already beaten Leslie Smith, so what's the point in running that one back?
Yeah.
Go for the girl that had a very, very close fight with her and arguably won that fight. A new opponent, a fresh opponent, a boxer who's going to stand their ground and not going to kind of shy away from a war. So anyway, if Cyborg's listening, I still stand. I still stand with my guns here.
Unless you come at him again, he'll go running.
If you come at me again, I'm just going to fucking cover up and shell up, and I can go into a turtle position or something.
But always in those divisions, when you have a Cyborg or when you have someone like a Valentina Shevchenko or an Amanda Nunes, the goal for the matchmakers should be to get new opponents, fresh opponents. Because just take when Ronda Rousey was at her peak, the interesting matchups were the kind of unknowns coming up against her. And it ended up, it was Holly Holm. Fair enough, she had an undefeated record and she had a big background in boxing, but when she came over, there was always an intrigue and a bit of build up when everyone thought Rosie was going to win the fight, but there was more eyes on it because there was an element of an unknown there. Bellator have to do that. Bellator have to get to a point where they're matching Cyborg against new opponents that offer something a little bit different each time. I'd say something if Cyborg had matched these girls and it was a very close fight, you want to see it get run back. But when Cyborg is running through these girls, it's hard to call for a rematch.
And I think as well with Cyborg is the fact that she's such a scary striker that girls tend to cover up against her and hope that they get taken down so that they could do some jiu-jitsu with her or something.
Yeah.
And Sinead is just not that type. Sinead will stand and bang, you know, and she's not. She would prefer to stay standing with Cyborg. So Kevin said if she's still watching, she knows what I look like now. Damn right she knows what I look like. I'm gonna go off and get some facial
surgery, yeah.
maybe grow a mustache, like a handlebar one or something. I don't know, the chocolate L one. So is that all our news, or have we got? No, that's all our news. Yeah,
that's all our news. We might as well get into
let's get into
post-mortem of UFC Vegas 18. And ironically enough, we were talking about kind of. You mentioned about guys that when it comes to the end of their career, and there's no way to go pretty, really. Yeah. Very few MMA fighters have gone out on top. You could literally, on one hand, name them.
Habib, GSP. Maybe did Randy Couture. He didn't really kind of fade.
No.
Well, he didn't fade. He went out when he was still relatively.
Yeah, but he lost 6 title fights over the span of his career.
Yeah, true.
You talk about Randy Couture in the early days when he was smoking everyone to the Randy Couture that was getting touched up by everyone and that got chinny. That's a tough sell as well. There's very, very few.
Henry Cejudo went
out on top. Ronda Rousey probably argues she went out on top as well, but absolutely not.
Yeah. 2 knockouts.
Oh no, but if you got Ronda Rousey in the room, she'd tell you she went out on top as the best in the world. But absolute nonsense.
So obviously we're talking about the main event here on this one. So we had Alexander Volkov versus Alistair Overeem. Volkov looked sharp. He looked really good.
Very sharp. The one thing I would say though is we've seen Overeem of late be far more tactical, far more kind of shy to get involved in a firefight. But I think this was the fight that we needed to see a little bit of the old Overeem, because you can't stand on the outside with someone that uses his range as well as Volkov. Volkov just had fun picking him apart. There was points in the fight where Overeem just looked confused and just completely out of his depth. And it's weird to say that Overeem looked out of his depth in a striking match. Yeah. To be just completely picked apart on the outside and look like he had no answers at all. And even the couple of takedown attempts he put in were appalling. He couldn't get into the clinch.
He couldn't get into the clinch to affect his style of takedown, which is generally a kind of like an over-under outside trip type of thing, or a kind of a lateral throw type of thing. He definitely needed to get into that clinch and use his knees on the inside, but Volkov was just on point, laser type accuracy with his straight shots, and then I believe it was the left hook that dropped him, that hurt him twice. First time he just kind of faded back towards the fence. The second time he went all the way to his knees and just looked like he wanted out. Or to be fair to me, probably didn't want out, but it looked like he needed to get out.
Yeah.
Great stoppage by the referee as well, Jason Herzog.
Took absolutely no unnecessary punishment.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Now we have a picture of you put up a post on the MMA opinion page, and of course you used this fantastic picture of poor old Alistair.
Yeah,
his face was a mess at the end of it, and that was all from kind of more or less straight shots down the middle.
This is the thing with Volkov. Like, he didn't look like he was trying much on the punches or putting much on the punches, but to see that damage from what he was putting out there, it must be a scary prospect for those above him. The likes of Rosenstruck now is fighting Cyril Gane.
Yeah,
and I believe that's probably the most likely next opponent, the winner of that.
Yeah,
that's not a sight you want to be seeing.
No,
especially someone of Overeem's caliber to be touched up like that. It's a scary prospect for anyone.
So you put this up on the page. So we've got as usual our MMA opinion fans are like top class on their engagement. So let's just kind of go through a few of these there. I'll put this up because for all them Paul's eyes are not the best.
Absolutely not.
So I'm just going to zoom them up a little bit here for you.
We have Ian Bain, who was the original owner of the MMA Opinion. How are you doing, Ian? Ian says the only correct answer here is to get back in the juice and head on a world tour outside of UFC. Japan, KSW, hell, bare knuckle, ream juice to the gills. Can't say I'm against it, Ian.
But I thought that was horse meat. It wasn't juice at all.
Ah, Jesus Christ. There was a bit of everything going on there. Oh, my God.
There was bull semen and everything. Yeah.
That Overeem that fought Brock Lesnar back then, Ubereem.
Yeah.
Holy shit, there wasn't a scarier man on the planet at that time. His traps were like just fucking, they were touching off his earlobes. Yeah,
he needed planning permission for those.
He was a scary man. And just to preface there before we read out the comments, that the question put to the MMA opinion fans was, we noted some of his achievements in MMA, and it was, would you like to see Overeem hang them up, or do you believe that he has more to offer at the top of the heavyweight division? I'll read another couple of the comments there. You have Arif Gull said his biggest highlight in the UFC was defeating a sick Brock after he was told to lay off the horse meat. He has never been the same. Just look at his weigh-ins video for that Brock fight and look at his physique after every fight since. Yeah, so we touched on that. I would argue that the Brock fight, for the name that it was probably the highlight, but certainly not the highlight of his career. My God, that man has achieved so much. And we listed some of his some of the people he's beat in the comment above. And I mean, like, he beat Mark Hunt twice, he beat Fabricio Verdum twice, he beat Junior Dos Santos, and the list goes on and on. So I disagree with you there, Arif, that was the highlight of his career.
Vernon Houston, I know everyone wants the belt during, but being champ isn't everything. Belts change hands every season. It's more about your accomplishments in the game, and he has many. Of course, he has every other major organization belt apart from the UFC belt.
Yeah.
So that's a good shout there, Vernon.
It is a good shout, but like you've mentioned before, you have to question someone's motives for fighting if that isn't their goal. I mean, whether they can get there or not. Like, there's some fighters that get into the UFC and you kind of know by them that they're never going to be the guy that picks up the belt. But a guy that's towards the end of his career that's still hanging around in that top 10, top 15, that's where it's dangerous. If they're not competing for the belt, but they're fighting the very best guys in the world over and over and over again, it can be dangerous. It can be life-changing as opposed to career-changing.
Absolutely. And I think like Overeem had kind of prefaced this fight by saying that this was his last run at the title.
Yes.
So having lost this fight, he's probably in that retirement kind of mindset right now.
He's definitely having a discussion with himself, I reckon.
Yeah, 100%.
But he also did say coming into this fight that this last run was, like he said, it's his last season essentially, and that a win or a loss isn't going to define this season.
Okay. All right,
which would worry me. That I think he's of the opinion that he might need 2 losses to be told where to go. But you don't want to see a guy of his caliber go out in 2 rough losses either. So I don't know, it's a strange one. You have Patrick Nichols said, hang him up for sure. That was almost as bad as when he fought. I can't spell his name off rip, but he split the Ream's lip.
Oh, Rosenstruck,
that's it, yeah. But then again,
he was winning that fight.
He was winning that fight up until very, very late in the 5th round. Yep. So, yeah, it's a tough one.
So Dom O'Brien says he looked like a shadow of himself, turtling up constantly, very little pressure from him. It was kind of sad.
Fully agree. Yeah, it was a very tough fight to watch.
He was covering up a lot. I noticed that he was holding his hands very, very high. I have a feeling that partially he was doing that to be able to get inside to a clinch range, but he just he brought his hands up to frame on Volkov, but never took the forward step to enter the clinch range. So it kind of backfired on him. And as
I was surprised that Volkov didn't go to the body more.
Exactly, I was going to say that next. Yeah. Yeah, the commentary team were calling for the body shots, and that toe puck to the body would have certainly worked when.
And that's one of his best shots.
100%. Yeah. Dylan Rayner says, nah, man, has to hang them up. I'm fed up of seeing legends of the sport get demolished. I respect he's a fighter and he feels he has more to offer, like winning the belt, but the sport has evolved massively since K1 days.
Yeah. Hard to disagree with it, Dylan. And Darren Moore, nothing left to prove. He hung around at a high level for a very long time. Would hate to see him get permanent brain issues. So yeah, I'd like to see him hang up the gloves if he's in a position to do so.
Oh, I think he's definitely in a position
100%.
to do so. I don't think he's wanting for any money.
No.
And even if he retires now, I still think he has he has quite a following in the bodybuilding world as well.
Yeah.
I remember watching he used to have his own YouTube series called the Ream, I think it was.
Never seen
so
it.
it was like a vlog type thing, and he like this is when he first came over to the UFC, and he was kind of marketing himself really, really heavily.
Yeah.
And he set up his own gym back in Holland, and the gym wasn't an MMA gym. It was MMA and bodybuilding and fitness. So like he definitely has a toe in many different areas, and I'm pretty sure he does well on sponsorship from supplement company and horse meat companies.
I'm giggling away here to myself. By the way, one of my favorite things about the page is the meme game or the GIF game from everyone. And Cecil Sipambo puts up a post. You ask too many questions. It is called the MMA opinion, Cecil. Very good.
So I suppose, would it be fair to say that we both want to see him retire?
Yeah.
If not this fight, definitely next fight.
But this is the problem. So he's going to be matched up with someone again in the top 15 because he's only lost to number 7 guy, and he still has some wins against some guys around him there. And it's probably going to be some younger guy that's looking to get up into the top 10. Someone like a Cyril Gann of that ilk. And the last thing you want to see is another young gun touch him up and put on another beating on him. It's hard. We'll touch on Frank Edgar there now in a minute, but these are fighters that you grew up watching, and it's hard to see them just get beat down. You know, if it's a competitive match and they're losing, it's much easier to kind of wrap your head around. But when these guys are getting beat down by kids of the division, and Volkov is no kid, but to Reem he is. Do you know what I mean? It's it's just tough to watch.
What about a Walt Harris or Greg Hardy?
The Greg Hardy one, I'm all on board with that.
Let's throw Greg Hardy on all of them.
Feed as many of these killers as you possibly can to Greg Hardy. But the Walt Harris one we've seen, he beat Walt Harris.
No, it was Volkov beat Walt Harris, right?
Didn't Reem beat him as well? No?
Oh, he did. Actually, you're right.
Yeah.
And actually Harris had him dropped and looked like he was going to beat him in the first round, and Reem survived. Yeah, and completely forgot about that. Played
that very well again, and that was kind of the evolution of Reem that we were seeing of late. That he played it very smart after getting hurt. So yeah, it's just there's not many options for him to fight that are going to be interesting, that are going to get him back up there. It's a tough sell now for me and Reem at the moment. But what Ian said there about the juicing and head back over to Japan, I'm all on board with that. Give him 6 months off, get back in that cycle and fuck off over there. Overeem is back.
So Kevin is lighting up, so Kevin offered me a facial tattoo so that Cyborg won't recognize me.
I'm definitely on board to see that anyway. If I can watch.
Would I carry that? Would I do well with the Mike Tyson one? I don't think I'd carry it off, would I?
I'm happy to pay for it. I'm happy to pay for it if you're willing to get it done.
I'm not sure if I'm willing to go that deep. But Kevin also said you wouldn't like him to become a stepping stone for others on their way up. Absolutely, I think that's what we're saying, Kevin. It's just a sad, the end of any, or the twilight of any fighter's career. It's just a very, very sad time. But yeah, hopefully he hangs him up soon enough anyway. But Volkov looking sharp. What's next for Volkov? He's not going to get a title shot straight away. I think he's a terrible matchup for John Jones.
Oh, that's a fantastic shout, actually. Yeah,
because John Jones is automatically getting the winner of Stipe and Ngannou.
Yeah,
as far as I'm aware.
If you look at the division now, this puts Volkov in 6th. Above him, you have Rosenstruck, who's matched against Gann. You have Derek Lewis and what's the other fella?
Curtis Blades.
Who are matched to fight each other. That's in 2 weeks' time, or in a week's time. And the problem is, whoever wins that, in theory, is next in line after John Jones, and I can't see them taking another fight because they've kind of worked all the way back to a title fight. Now they're going to have to sit out a bit, but I can't see them waiting around or taking another really tough fight in that space of time. So there's kind of a queue building up now at the moment, and there's very little options above Volkov. So I would imagine the winner of Cyril Gane versus Rosenstruck is the most kind of likely option for Volkov next. And by the way, they're 2 tough matchups. I think he's a horrible matchup for Rosenstruck. I think Volkov takes that, but I think Cyril Gane is a tough matchup for Volkov then. So.
Yeah, I still think Volkov beats both those guys. I agree. Gane is a harder target to hit, and he's more explosive.
Did Volkov not already beat Gane?
I'm not 100%. Let me just
I'll double check it there. Yeah,
I'll stick it on screen there, and we'll go through his record. So he's beaten Overeem, Harris, got beaten by Blades, Greg Hardy, Derek Lewis, Fabricio Verdun, Stefan Struve, Roy Nelson, Tim Johnson. Yeah, so not yet.
I didn't.
So
yeah, that's a tough matchup, but yeah,
I think that John Jones should have a fight at heavyweight before he gets a crack at the.
I believe so as well.
So I think John Jones Alexander Volkov is a good scrap. You know, I mean, I think it's actually just a bigger version of Alexander Gustafsson versus John Jones, which is a fight that we already know. Jones had a tough time with the first time round. Volkov might be just that little bit better in the striking, you know.
The problem there, of course, is that we all know that Volkov's kryptonite is the wrestling. So John Jones has the blueprint to beat him, and I think John Jones' wrestling would be way, way too much for Volkov. So in a kickboxing match, that's a fantastic matchup. But if Jones played that smart, I think he could run through Volkov quite easily.
I don't see him taking him down that easy. I think he's shown good takedowns against light heavyweights, but you know, taking down a heavyweight is different.
But then again, DC did it for how many years, and he was the only man to put DC on his arse.
That's true.
I think Jones' wrestling is some of the most underrated in the game, if it is even underrated. But people don't talk about it enough because he always stands and strikes with everyone. But I think if the fight comes along where he's being met on the feet and being matched on the feet, I think he has a route to victory there.
Yep, interesting times for the heavyweight division. It's great to see.
Definitely,
it's competitive at the top. I don't like this John Jones holding up the show, but at least we have, like, you know, the top 7, top 8 guys are all killers, and then you have outside of them you have Romanov coming up. You have
Greg Hardy.
Yeah.
But you do have Cyril Gane as well. Looks like
Tom Aspinall is coming up there.
Yeah.
So there's some really good guys coming through. So
a lot of talent.
It's a great time. Well, it's not a great time to be a heavyweight, but it's a good time to be a heavyweight fan.
Yeah, definitely.
Co-main event.
Yeah, and again we go back to legends not looking their best. Then again, it's only 30 seconds. It's hard to.
I actually thought Frankie was looking very, very good right up until he got KO'd. I mean, his head movement was good. He was looking sharp. I thought he was actually playing the right game to chase down the taller fighter. But obviously, like, Sandhagen's timing and accuracy on that shot, it was like a walk-off KO jumping knee. It was like the 3 coolest things that you could do in MMA. He did them all at once.
Yeah. Just it's hard to see Frankie go out. And like...
Oh, he was stiff as a poker.
Yeah. Tough. And not to say that he's not still a player in that division, but it's hard to see where you put him next and where does he go, because we've talked about the bantamweight division before. It's killer's road down to 15 and beyond. Like, I mean, there's some guys not ranked at bantamweight that are absolutely horrible matchups for Frankie, let alone anyone in the top 15. So he was kind of given a I wouldn't say he was given a push in the division, rightly so. He's a former champion and a contender in another division again. He was going to go in there high up in the division, but I think now that he has to go back and mix it in that division, I just fear for Frankie that I don't think there's an easy road back to that title shot. If he'd have won this one, that's the way to go. But like it's just, there's so many killers in that division. It's going to be a really, really tough road. And the one thing you could never do with Frankie Edgar is rule him out. I think we've seen that multiple times through his career. But yeah, it's going to be a tough road back to the top.
As the fight started, the one thing I did think as I was looking at it, I was saying Frankie Edgar, Brian Moore would be a hell of a fight.
That would be some scrap.
And I think Brian would be well up for that as well.
There was a time when Conor was trying to get the Frankie fight on short notice. I can't remember who fell through, but Conor put his name in the ring, and Conor was on the phone straight away to Brian. He was like, you need to get up here and get some rounds in, because Brian's the closest thing you could possibly 100%. Get to Frankie, like stylistically there.
Yeah, their boxing style is almost identical.
They're two strong wrestlers in the sense of their offensive wrestling, and be a brilliant matchup.
And Frankie, age 39 going into this. We also had Clay Guida at 39 and Alistair Overeem at 40, I believe.
40, yeah.
So, like, those three guys all kind of still competing at a very, like, do you know, Frankie Edgar, I know he got KO'd. Alistair Overeem got KO'd, but it's not like that they're not getting absolutely whooped. You know, they're competitive at such a kind of an advanced stage. I mean, 39 in another sport and they'd be well retired.
But here's my point. So the two guys that were competing at the highest level both got badly beaten. Well, the Frank
on this occasion they did.
Again,
anyway.
the Frankie one, it's a freak knockout, but it is what it is. He got knocked out badly at his age. And then the guy who was fighting way outside the top 15 level, and I know people will argue with me that Michael Johnson was recently in the top 15, but he has 6 losses in his last 8 fights or something going into this one. So Michael Johnson is certainly not the fighter that he was even 2 years ago. So the level that Clay was fighting at is far different to what the two boys were fighting at. And now Clay looked phenomenal, but yeah, it's a tough one. And by the way, Corey Sandhagen.
Yeah, definitely tight shot next.
Ooh. I mean, if you're Corey, what do you want to happen in this matchup in March? Do you want surely you want Peter Yan to beat Sterling, because if Sterling wins, fair enough, you get the opportunity to rematch him and get that win back. But Sterling does always have that argument, I finished you very recently. Who else is in line? Blah, blah, blah. And maybe TJ might jump the queue. But if Peter Yan wins, whatever about the talk of TJ Dillashaw coming back, you can't argue your case more for a title fight than what he just did
100%.
Against Frankie Edgar.
Yeah, I don't see anybody else.
So do you think he wants Yan to win in that case?
No, I think he wants Aljo to win so that he has a rematch.
I can see him being passed over if Aljo wins.
But they're already talking about Peter Yan versus TJ. So if Peter Yan wins, then TJ definitely will skip the queue. Whereas if Aljo wins, I think they'll run back the Sandhagen one.
Yeah, I don't know. Either way, it would be an absolute travesty if he got passed up for the next shot. TJ did what he did, became champion twice, but that's all.
It's all got an asterisk beside it now.
Exactly. And you can't have a guy like that come back and then step in on a title fight. He has to go, like we said about Frankie, he has to go back and mix it. Prove you're the best in the world without that shit in your system.
Yep.
So go back to a 10-15, fight those guys and work your way up again. I'm not for TJ coming back in for a title fight at all. I'd like to see him get 2 fights before he gets that opportunity.
Clay Guida, as you mentioned, not looking a year over 38.
Clay Guida has never aged though. I was bursting my bollocks laughing at his post-fight presser.
He
just didn't stop moving and jumping.
No. He reminded me of Macho Man Randy Savage as he was on the mic as well.
He reminded me of a fella after about 18 lines of coke.
I wouldn't know what that looks like.
He's just hopping on the spot while he was talking his post-fight presser. That man is tapped. How was he 39 years old?
Yeah, no, he's a special type of human, all right.
Yeah, he has freaky.
You remember his
energy.
fight with Diego Sanchez? Right,
Yeah,
that was just two ferrets making love, like
insane.
crazy.
But he's had some of those wars through the years where, because there's no backward step out of clay, like, and he just enjoes that.
He fought Frankie Edgar as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
You think about, like, Frankie is fighting 2 weight classes down now from him. Like,
Yeah.
it's mad. It's mad how these weight classes work. Like,
And Clay's always been the guy that looks like he's undersized for the division, but he has some power. He has some serious power. Yeah. Again, Clay is one of those guys. I like seeing him fight these fights at that level, but I don't want to see him get 3 or 4 wins together and them trying to go.
poor Michael Johnson is not having a great run.
I imagine he's caught.
Yeah, that's his 4th loss in a row now.
Yeah, but I think it's 7 in his last 9, if I'm not mistaken. Do you want to put up his record there?
Yeah, so he had 2 wins. He beat Artem Lobov and Andrei Touchy-Feely. So
he beat the GOAT, though. So, you know, there's that.
Well, that's why he's been given 4 in a row. You know, because they said if he got past Artem, he must be something special.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He's one of only 11 men to do it.
That's true.
Yeah.
So Clay Guida, where does he go from here?
Again, it's a tough sell, but he's in fun fights, and he doesn't look like a guy that's
Well, he could have
showing the signs of.
Well, whoever lost this was going to be 4 in a row. Or no, actually, they're grappling fights, so they don't count.
Yeah. But he's still lost 2 in a row. And weirdly enough, right? So going into this, I had Johnson picked, even though Johnson's looked horrible of late. The only reason is based on Guida's last fight. He fought Bobby Green.
Yep.
And Johnson would be very similar to him in the sense that crisp boxing and kind of leading off the jab. So I thought it was going to be a tough night for Clay, but he made quite, well, I wouldn't say easy work.
Johnson's boxing didn't look great at all. He was very, very leant over. The commentary team were talking about his hips being back and his head forwards in anticipation of the takedown attempts from Clay Guida.
Yeah.
But it took all the sting out of his punches. He was basically throwing arm punches for the entire fight, and even if he did land, he wasn't going to do any damage.
His boxes were kind of like a Nate Diaz kind of, you know, the way he flicks some punches out. It was very that. It wasn't. There was no popping them at all.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I'd say Johnson's caught, and to be honest, I don't know where to go for Johnson after this because he's not an appeal to anyone right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no promotion going to go, oh, Johnson's been caught. That's a big name. It's a tough sell. Like
it is. Yeah, no, I agree. So, the only other fight, or there was 2 other fights on the main card. So we had Alexandra Pantoja versus Manel Cape coming across from Ryzen as the former bantamweight champion. Big heat on him and
a lot of hype.
Yeah. This wasn't a great fight.
No.
I only got to watch it today, but
the flyweight division generally they're good fights, but yeah, Pantoja. Look, he did enough to win the fight. It just wasn't.
I got the impression from this fight that it was almost like Pantoja was minding his ranking. He was doing enough to just kind of get ahead on the scorecards as he thought it was, and taking no risks whatsoever. You know, he wasn't throwing nearly enough shots, even though he was ahead on the significant damage. And it was Cape that was getting the takedowns towards the end of the round. He could easily have, you know, under certain criteria and under certain judges and officials, he
could have been given to Cape.
Yeah, he may have stolen that fight, you know.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's a big scalp for Pantoja. You know, taking out a champion of another organization on his way.
And a guy that's coming in with that much hype because, like a lot of the people that I saw that were making picks were leaning towards Cape. I didn't know a big deal about Cape. I'd heard about him coming in and there was a lot of hype, and I'd seen some of his achievements beforehand, but I hadn't seen him.
So I'll just go through his.
But in that sense, I was kind of underwhelmed by his performance.
So he has a win against Mitsugaki, and he also has one against Ian McCall down here as well.
Yeah.
He lost to Horiguchi. Nakamura, he has a win over. So
some big wins, but just I was a little underwhelmed from the hype that I was hearing. And look, I hope he bounces back because it's a guy that can mix it up in that division, another division that's on fire at the moment. So
absolutely. And this fight, Beneil Dariush, Diego Ferreira.
I'm going to let you take the lead on this, because what did you message me?
This wasn't a fight.
What did you message me again about this?
This fight was just pure filthy porn. The only thing this fight was missing was a soundtrack from Barry White. That's literally all that was missing. My God, what a fight. For anybody out there that wants to study jiu-jitsu, wrestling, how to get off your back, how to threaten from the bottom, how to control somebody who's good at jiu-jitsu, this had everything in it. And it wasn't like the two of them couldn't strike either.
Yeah.
Like they were on the feet. Like Ferreira was supposedly going to have a stand-up advantage, and he was looking to kind of stay there. But Dariush was landing the more significant shots. He was pinging him with straight shots. And once they got to the ground, then Dariush was like, both of them are jiu-jitsu black belts. Dariush was predominantly in the top position, and he was applying a sort of a Khabib style control, you know, like all of these kind of triangling the legs and
very heavy on top.
Yeah, exactly. But Ferreira was managing to spin underneath. He was attacking leg locks. He was attacking triangles. Like it was like trying to hold on to like a fish that was greased up with lube. This fight had everything in it. Like, I am going to watch this fight at least 15 times over the next 24 hours, and I'm going to study every single sequence that they did, because I think there's so much to be learned here. You know, like particularly
from both sides.
From both sides, huge. Like, I mean,
which is strange in a fight that you can normally watch a fight and you're watching sequences that one fighter is dominating and it's spectacular, and you're studying his sequences.
Yep.
When both guys are doing it simultaneously, it's phenomenal. Yeah.
Yep. It was a pleasure to watch this fight. I had Beneil Dariush win all 3 rounds, and I think he won a split decision, which was very unusual. At least one referee or one judge gave the fight to Diego Ferreira, which I mean, that judge needs to go to Specsavers, because that just wasn't happening. Like, but you know, it just goes to show you can't leave it in the hands of the judges. But what a fight! My God, what a fight!
But it was a weird matchup for me right from the off, because as much as I liked the build up to the first match, we kind of knew the outcome. Yeah, I felt like it was going to go a very similar way, and it did in the end. Obviously, this was a much more entertaining fight than the first one. But when a guy that's a little bit younger, they're both very similarly matched, but one guy edges it very cleverly. When they rematch, I always feel like it's going to go the same way. I feel like it's tough for the person that loses, unless they lose in a way that they get submitted quite early or knocked out quite early, or they just get caught, or it's some sequence that they messed up. But when both guys are at their best and you lose a decision, I always find it hard for the guy that lost to come back and unless they get a knockout or submission or something. But I saw it going the same way.
And Dariush was very vocal about it as well in this post-fight interview. He said that he felt disrespected, and he felt disrespected on behalf of Ferreira as well, that both of them weren't matched against top 10 or top 5 guys, and that they had to, like, outside the top 10, had to fight each other again, which pushes one of them way down, and one of them creeps in. So, and fair play to Dariush for, like, you know, not only fighting his own corner, but fighting for Ferreira as well, because like Ferreira didn't get a post-fight interview.
That is the knock-on effect of what's going on in the lightweight division at the moment, and the fact that there's a logjam at the top. But Dariush has certainly put his name in that mix. He's right there now with the likes of RDA, with the likes of Islam Makhachev. Those are the guys that are knocking on the door going, hey, let us in. We're in this mix as well. And
he's going to frog lead one of them. Like,
you could argue Tony Ferguson's down there with 2 losses in a row as well. It's a strange time, but I'd like to see Dariush get one of the top 5 next, certainly.
No, it was a great fight. So, I mean, other than that, we have like kind of we're creeping up on an hour here. So maybe just any of the undercard fights that stood out to you. Anybody that was
the opening fight of the night. Again, it was a very quick fight and just under 30-second finish. But O'Day Osborne looked absolutely phenomenal as well.
And he's one of your Contender Series guys.
Yeah. And he had a very tough matchup in his debut in the promotion. So this was only his second time out.
Do you know what was crazier about that?
What's that?
He was scheduled to fight a flyweight.
Yeah, absolute bananas. And look, and carry that power up to featherweight.
Yeah, 2 weight classes.
Now, what I will say there is Jerome Rivera fights at bantamweight, but also is looking to transition down to flyweight.
Yep.
So he's a smaller guy.
Yep.
So it's probably not fair to say that his power carried up because they're both around the same size. But Rivera is certainly a bigger guy, and for O'Day Osborne to pack that power at 45, and he's going competing at 25.
Yep. He's called out for Figueiredo, or his younger brother.
Yeah, either one, he said.
Either one, yeah. Jerome Rivera looks like he's going to be cut at this stage. This is his 3rd loss in a row, so poor bugger. Timur Valiev, another one to watch.
A good performance, but not massively impressive either.
There were some sequences in there from a coaching point of view. I'll be watching that fight back also between that one and.
But again, I think he did just enough to win without ever really threatening to or trying. There was a couple of times that he was looking for the finish, but not enough. I don't think. I think he had the day's number all day long. But he never really pushed for a finish throughout the fight.
Yeah, the Choi and Zalal fight. I don't know if you remember that one, but I actually had that scored the other way around. It was a
what?
Yeah, I felt that Zalal had definitely got the first one because when you come down to what was the significant strikes, the only thing that was significant about that first round was the jabs. Everything else was incidental. So I gave him the first round, and I also gave him the 3rd round.
Yeah, again, that's my cynical. We've talked about this before. That's my cynical scoring, where I score in the eyes of the judges. But I thought Zalal prided himself in his boxing, and he was like he didn't throw his hands at all. He never let them go. He looked very unimpressive for a guy that's got a bit of hype behind him of late. I had Choi winning that all day long. Ugly fight.
Yeah, it wasn't the best fight. Yeah. No. Procopio looked very, very good against McCann.
Very, very good.
And I didn't realize that McCann had lost her father recently enough. Was it?
Because when she put her gloves down in the middle of the cage.
Yeah.
After the bout, there was some confusion, and then I thought initially that
she had retired.
She was hanging them up. But I don't know for certain if she's lost her father, but she did come out and say it was for her father that she put them in the cage. So it might have been in remembrance or whatever. But
and there was comment that during the fight from the commentary team that she was fighting for something bigger.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a story there that maybe we need to brush up on them. But I was surprised to see Justin and Edwards back in there because I only like
2 weeks ago.
Tough fight. Carol Hoza was
damn impressive.
Yeah, very, very strong. Very strong.
And the thing with Edwards as well, like she looked like a big, strong girl in that division after her debut.
Not next to Hoza, she wasn't. Hoza's legs were just like tree trunks.
Yeah, and she said she wants top 10 next, and considering that division is so light, I could see her being given top 5 next. Hopefully they keep her away from the GDRs and the homes right away because they tend to just knock off contenders and make that division very stale. So hopefully they play it smart with Rosa and we could see a new contender come up. Yeah,
absolutely. Apart from that, you had the Darren Smith, Justin James, and Danilo Marquez and Mike Rodriguez. Devontae Smith closed up James' eye. I don't know if you saw. Did you see how he did that?
Yeah.
So with the knuckle of his thumb.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. So it's
so
the
it was
one
a right
part.
hand, but
yeah, it was. He kind of definitely marked him up a little bit earlier with some elbows from the side control top, but you didn't see the swelling actually blow up until he had the back and he started slap. So James had his right hand kind of covering up here to block the punches that were coming to this side of his face.
Yeah.
So Smith then was punching around the corner, and the one part of your like the one knuckle that's not covered by an MMA glove is the thumb knuckle.
Yeah,
and he was landing that over and over and over again
Into
on
the eye
the
socket.
right onto the eye socket, and like you saw how fast his eye just like
Yeah,
blew
yeah.
up. It was almost like he had some sort of a compressed air gun up his arse,
Well,
blowing air
I
right
had
into it.
actually thought that he'd, you know, the way some fighters break their nose and then blow their nose and their eyes, it was
Yeah.
similar to that. So my initial reaction when that had happened and his eye blew up so quick was there was something like that, but there appeared to be nothing wrong with his nose.
No, it was just purely on the eye itself. But definitely that those slaps with the thumb knuckle definitely didn't help that eye.
And it was a correct stoppage as well, by the way.
Oh, huge!
Had
Yeah,
to
sure.
be
His
done.
his
He
eye
couldn't
was
see it
completely
all,
closed.
yeah.
Couldn't see it all, and it wasn't like he was winning the fight. He did land a nice overhand, and but he looks way too small for that division.
Yeah.
Over 40 amateur fights as well. Justin James had.
Yeah.
So
Which is
like
insane from America, yeah.
Yeah. So he's like and now 16-7 at pro. So what's that? 23 pro fights on top of 40. So like this dude has taken a lot of
He has
punishment. to
miles
his-
on the clock, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe needs to consider either dropping down in weight. Like that was a catch weight at 160.
Yeah.
Even at 155, James looks too small. He's definitely a featherweight, if not a bantam.
Yeah, but then again, some of these guys find it fierce difficult to cut down.
Mm.
It's a tough call for them. Like they might be undersized at the division, but some of them, for different reasons, have issues cutting. Because you'd imagine his team would have told him at this point, right, you got to get down to a lower weight class. But
Yep.
he seems to be persisting.
Yep. Then Danilo Marquez and Mike Rodriguez wasn't a great fight. I don't know. Do you remember this fight or?
No, I fell asleep during this one.
Okay, well, I'm not surprised you fell asleep. It was just basically.
I was saying to Liam before we came on, this is the first UFC card I've fallen asleep in about 4 years. So
Well, I know like a lot of our American viewers will be shocked at the fact that I was falling asleep for UFC fights. But to be fair, it was like 5 a.m. when this was on. Like,
yeah, it was very late. My body,
and your bedtime is like 9 a.m., isn't it, or 9 p.m.?
No, I'm normally 9 a.m. My body just needs to get used to the fights coming back now again. I'll be writing rain for next week, but
Yeah.
I better be. 258, it's an absolute stonker of a card coming up next week.
Can't wait.
Will we be doing a preview and a review? Or
We're going to have to go all out on this one, I think.
Yeah.
So we've been quiet on comments this evening, but I know everybody is just kind of holding back for next week's show. That's what's happening, you know.
Definitely.
You had an interview up this week. Who was it that you put up the interview this week with?
Yeah, so David Hay had an interview with Matt Frivola this week, who was just after returning home from his trip to Abu Dhabi. He, of course, fought in UFC 257, and he was originally scheduled to fight Otman Azaitar, and then it was Saruki, and he ended up fighting. He took a tough loss there, but he's quite open. It's a very good interview, so if you want to check that out on the YouTube page, the MMA Opinion, David Hay did a great interview there, so check that out.
Awesome. So what night are we doing our preview? Is that going to be Thursday night, Friday night,
Thursday or Friday, whatever.
Thursday
suits
or
you.
Friday? Yeah, cool.
We'll let you know anyway.
So that's pretty much it. Make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe on the YouTube channel, guys. It really helps out with the algorithm and stuff. Any comments, stick them in. We'll come back to you. We'll reply ourselves in the comment boxes. And until next week, or until Thursday, Friday, or no, Monday. What are you doing? I don't know. I should really have practiced this part.
I've lots on this week, but yeah, it'll be Thursday. We're back to you, and we'll have a pro-am predictions up this week for the main card as well.
That's it. You're actually covering an Irish show.
Yeah,
So-
I'll be doing the pre-fight interviews for the upcoming Cage Legacy card, which is a huge pay-per-view card coming up in Ireland. There's a lot of the top amateur guys from Ireland are fighting on that card. Some pros fighting on that card as well. We have our own Palahan here from the gym is making his pro debut. There's a couple of guys, the twins are making their amateur debuts as well, Chris and Sean McCarthy, and they're fighting some great opponents. It's going to be a fantastic card, and I'll be doing some interviews, and we'll be putting them up in different channels as well.
So for anybody watching in from America, make sure you get to the interviews, because then you'll have a much better vested interest in the card that comes up. You know yourself when you're watching a UFC event, or even, like, it doesn't matter what event, you watch a Ryzen, a KSW, a Bellator event. If you don't know the characters that are fighting, you're not as interested in the outcome of the fight. and that can often be why we'll say like amateur shows don't get as much ticket sales as professional shows. But in this case, because of the MMA opinion and because of Paul agreeing to go ahead and feature a lot of these athletes, you guys are going to know all of the fighters before we get to the pay-per-view, and I can guarantee you the fights are going to be cracking, because I know these athletes. A lot of them have been back and forth to the IMAF championships. Most of them have like 20, 30 amateur fights. So it's like even the amateurs are not really amateurs. They're all
high level.
They're all high level
all the way down the card. Yeah,
and it's going to be a great night. So watch out for that. And if you guys have any requests to interview anybody, make sure you bang them in the comments, and we'll chase them down, track them down, and get Paul and Dave on the mic. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks a million. We'll see you next week. And until next week, this has been the MMA Opinion.
I want to fight with Chuck. Chuck.
I think he just blew his wad there.
Anderson Silva, you absolutely suck. Are you still drunk right now? Are you still drunk? What's going on? This is Blue Shit.